Thank you to James Narengi for becoming a member of the Kinetic Rugby League channel, and thank you to every member that supports the work that I do for this channel. If you'd like to become a member, you can do by clicking the join button below this video and joining for as little as £1 per month. But let's get on with the video. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Kinetic Rugby League channel. I've left a recap of last round's predictions up on the screen for you guys to check out. I got 5 out of 6 with the wins, and finally, after God knows how long, an exact score prediction. 36-6 to Hull KR versus Castleford was spot on. I heard Matthew Shaw at All Out Rugby League got one spot on. That was Leigh versus Leeds, so well done to you, sir. But yeah, I got one myself. Finally. But yeah, as always, if you guys have your own predictions, let me know in the comment section down below. But let's get on with the first game of this week. Kicking things off this week, we have the Warrington Wolves taking on Catalans Dragons. Starting with form, Warrington have won 2 in their last 5. Catalans have won 0 in their last 5. Warrington have lost 3 games in a row. Catalans have lost 5 games in a row. These sides met 4 weeks ago. The score was 24-20 to Warrington. It was dominant in the first half for Warrington, dominant in the second half for Catalans. This time round, I don't think it's going to be quite as binary, I guess you could say, quite as simple, where one half is dominant, then the other, the opposite way. Could be a little bit mixed, a little bit back and forth in this one, this time around. The main advantage for Catalans, probably the size of their forwards. You look at the guys in the front row, the options they have in Busquets, Navarrete, Pangai Jr., Garcia, if he ever plays in the front row. Towards the edges, I think it's a little bit more even. The size that Warrington have more towards the edges with the likes of Fitzgibbon, or when they did have Russell, now with Sam Stone, and with Matteson in there as well. Towards the edges, the battle's a little bit more balanced. And in some of the 1v1 matchups could suit Warrington a little bit better, but it's up front is where it looks more advantageous for Catalans. And then possibly getting quick play of the balls, possibly getting offloads off the back of it. They can do that a fair few times in games, so we'll have to see how well Warrington can slow that down, because they can be known to allow a lot of offloads in a single game. So we'll see, that could be a major advantage for Catalans. A major advantage for Warrington, though, is probably speed and execution in attack. We've seen, with a little bit more clarity and a little bit more continuity with the lineups, having some of the better players back in there in the spine, the combinations, the attacking presence has been a little bit better. The speed against Wigan, I think, was on display. Williams really led the team around offensively. If Dufty is back in this week, which I assume he would be, then that just adds a bit more pace to the team as well. I think partly, without Dufty in there against Wigan, it forced Warrington to have to come out the shell a little bit. So Ratchford looked quite comfortable. He looked all right in the number 1 role. My concern for Warrington is, yes, they'll potentially be quicker with Dufty in there and the actual proper spine that they want, but would they fall back into the same rhythm, default shapes and default speed and style with the normal lineup, because they're now comfortable with everyone else, if that makes sense. But with Ratchford in there, they kind of had to play beyond that without Dufty. So that could be a positive and a negative. We'll see what it's like there with the proper spine in there. Warrington's defence, I think, has been a little bit better, a little bit more consistent in limiting points. Still not great, but it's still better than what Catalans have done. So in the last 5 weeks, going from most recent to further backwards, Warrington's conceded 24, 20, 20, 20, and then 12. Whereas Catalans, it's been 18, 28, 34, 24, 44. So a little bit more up and down. And a matchup that could actually work quite nicely for Warrington in this one as well, offensively, is probably Jake Thulis versus Darragh Latour. I think that's a matchup that's interesting. 2 young players, limited on experience in their careers, but this season getting a lot of game time. For me, Darragh Latour has done some good stuff, but I always feel like he's kind of left on his own. He's having to do something by himself, or is still getting to grips with the pace of the game. He always tries, he always wants to try and do a little bit more, but I've got a feeling he's going to be left kind of by himself, either offensively and defensively as well. You look at Jake Thulis with his opportunities he had versus Eckersley, versus Wigan at the weekend. I think Warrington look a little bit more suited to go at Darragh Latour, isolate him, and Thulis could find it a little bit easier to get some breaks. I don't think Darragh Latour is as quick as Eckersley to be able to recover the way that Eckersley could against Warrington. So I think that left edge for Warrington could look okay. And another positive for Wyatt is when George Williams is down that left edge, they look so much more effective. He's mostly been on the right-hand side due to Sneyd being a left-footed kicker, or Leyland when he's been playing as well. So when Williams is down that left edge, Warrington look more effective. So I think that's an area that could work out. So we'll have to see how that kind of unfolds. Another major positive for Warrington is that Danny Walker has also been back the last couple of weeks, and he's looked really impressive, or to his usual self, creating breaks through the middle. And there was a moment against Wigan, even when we're not getting quick play of the balls, he just stutters for a moment, steps, draws players in, and he's gone. That's the quality that Danny Walker has available, and that's the kind of stuff that he could produce. I think Barmforth for Catalans actually has the ability to do that. So does Da Costa. He has that in his game, but I think Barmforth's been doing it more for Catalans Dragons when he's been coming on. So I want to see more minutes from him, actually. Now, Catalans, I think they've shown that they can find points against the run of play. I think that's kind of how it's going to go. They'll be fine through the middle. I think Sneyd's kicking will control things better than what Farge or Rouge or Kiri, whichever combination they'll go with in the halves for Catalans. So I think the flow of the game would suit Warrington. But Catalans, I think, can go against the flow of the game and find points or be disruptive. And that's going to be one of their other major positives. So I think even when Warrington are on top, sometimes they might struggle to put up points inside the red zone. And Catalans can have resilient moments on their own goal line. And against the Warrington attack that still has a bit more work to do, it might be a little bit easier to defend that. And then off the back of it, against the run of play, Catalans can find some points or march up the field. And then they've got guys like Kiri that can produce good moments. They've got guys like Espodo Bichet and Daryl Latour that do try and add a little bit extra. They do run hard. They do work hard. Maybe they've been making a few too many mistakes recently, but I think the offload potential from Catalans is going to be huge as well. Not just the meters that they can make through the middle, but the offloads as well, getting the second phases. I just think Warrington, with a full spine in there, I think the matchups have got towards the edges look a bit more favourable for Warrington as well. It's just the middles that they can't compete through this week. But for a prediction in this one, I'm going to go Warrington Wolves 24, Catalans Dragons 14. Next up, we have what could possibly be, and is most likely to be, the game of the round, with Wigan taking on Hull Kingston Rovers, starting with form. Both have won 3 in their last 5 Super League games. Now, Wigan should have French back for this week, and KR should have May back in the side as well this week. In terms of the advantages they bring, for Wigan, having French back in means that they've got more speed in their attack, possibly with him as the number 6 as well, instead of Jack Faramond, maybe more strength defensively as well towards the right edge, and also the ability to penetrate defensive lines is possibly greater as well, if French is going to be playing this week, which I believe he will be. But having May back in there for Hull Kingston Rovers means that they can put pieces exactly where they want to. So they don't have to maybe adjust Morg's role a little bit. They don't have to adjust Broadbent. It means that they can keep Lewis locked in on the left edge, controlling that left side. May locked in on the right edge, controlling the right side with his kicking. Morg at 1, just popping up where he needs to, rather than him taking on the kicking down the right, which he might still do, but they've got pieces where they need them to be, and then Broadbent can kind of go where he's needed. He can play on the wing, in the centres, at fullback, but wherever they put him, he normally does a good job anyway, and he's normally reliable. In terms of a matchup that works for KR this week, the left edge versus Eckersley. As I was saying for Warrington, that left side, when Williams was attacking the left edge, going at Eckersley's side, King was an option, Jake Thulis was an option. This week, KR can look at that as a potential target, and with the ability that they have to execute better than Warrington does, and the speed, everything about their attack is stronger than Warrington's, that if Eckersley is playing in that right wing position, maybe they can learn and adjust a little bit to make sure that those kind of breaks don't happen again. But KR have an option there, they have an edge to go to, and over the last couple of weeks, we do know that KR like to get into a rhythm, they like to get into a process of just getting to the left edge and kicking. But I think they've been a little bit more adventurous in recent weeks. It feels that way to me anyway, that they are spreading the ball a little bit earlier inside the midfield, and they're finding more consistent breaks down the left edge. And I think a big difference this week is, you look at the pace comparison between Jake Thulis and Burgess, it was probably a little bit easier for Eckersley to recover, so even if he was Doulis was able to get around the outside. Eckersley could recover with his speed, whereas Burgess, I think we can all agree, is at least a little bit quicker than Jake Doulis, and it would be harder for Eckersley to make up that ground again if he is sort of isolated and caught out on that side. So that, I think, could be a major advantage for KR this week. A matchup that works nicely for Wigan is French versus Lewis. We saw in the grand final, especially last year. We've seen in plenty of occasions this year, French against pretty much anybody and everybody can isolate an individual towards the edges. There's a step, there's a step coming, yet it still happens, and then there's a break. That's going to be a particular matchup that I think suits Bevan French massively. Mikey Lewis could still do it the other way round, but I think more so French could really isolate Lewis. And a couple times, if he doesn't really have support from his centre or his back rower on that left edge, Lewis could be isolated, and then there's a few breaks over on that right-hand side. The battle in the middle is going to be really important. Both have size and power. That's blatantly obvious. KR have more offloads. According to stats this year, they got more offloads and higher average gain. That might be slightly misleading due to possibly carries out the backfield as well, but they've got more average gain through the middle, most likely, from what it looks like. I think early on, KR will probably be better off through the middle, just because you got guys like Whitbread, who he's been starting over the last couple of weeks, and he's been putting in multiple carries per set, a bit like the way I talk about Wormsley for Saints, putting in multiple carries per set and long stints as well. Hadley's been starting really well. So whoever they have up front, I think it works out better for KR at the start. And then I think Wigan's impact, especially from Mago, is going to be important. So after the first 20 to 30 minutes, the ruck might look slightly more favourable for the Robins, but then it's when Mago comes on, he can change things a little bit. I don't think that either will dominate through the middle, but it's just, it will look slightly better for KR first, and then when Mago comes on, he can either equalise things or just kind of turn the tide a little bit in Wigan's favour. And that'll go on to, quick play the balls in a second, there's a point to get onto, which I'll get onto very shortly. But a final few things, there's some more advantages for Wigan in this one, I think, as well. First of all, Jayfield and Bevan French having a more consistent spine back together with O'Neill, with Smith, with French, with Field. They'll feel a lot more comfortable together, so that's a huge advantage. And just Field and French anyway, against such a strong defensive line like Hull KR's, it's those kind of players that you need to create something from nothing, which they're capable of doing against anybody. Second is big game experience. We've seen KR have played in a few finals over the last couple of years now, and just high-end games anyway, so they're getting more big game experience. Wigan do have a little bit more. I think sometimes appear calmer in the bigger games, so that's another advantage for them. Also, the wins over KR, the last two wins, the one in this season, I think KR were probably whether the favourites or I think maybe on a better run at the time. I can't quite remember the circumstances when Wigan won earlier this year, and of course the grand final in 2024. But then the point about quick play the balls, the hooker options. Wigan have O'Neill and Leeming. KR have Litton and McAlorum, which means that however that forward battle's going, Wigan have more options that can display that speed out of the ruck, that can possibly break the line and use up the meters if there's space behind the ruck from a quick play the ball or even an offload. McAlorum can do that, but he's not the type to do it. He's not the type to go out of his way to try and find some more meters. You don't normally see him with high meter stats at the end of a game. But O'Neill and Leeming are the type to really go at the line, really engage and draw plays in if they need to. So I think that's another advantage, that when McAlorum's on, that maybe takes some out of the game, whereas it's possibly more consistent over 80 minutes for Wigan. And the final point is, I think even though KR have been taking more risks recently, this is a kind of game where it's got that grand final style where they would likely just go back and forth a lot, but I think it's Wigan that is more likely to take more risks. And we saw when Leeds did that against KR, it worked. When Leigh did that against KR, it worked. So I think if Wigan take more risks, as long as they can be clean with it, they're more likely to gain more ground towards the edges to make up for possibly the lack of in comparison relative to what KR might make through the middle. So there's a few advantages there for Wigan. Now, I do think that KR have been the better side. Defensively, they've been the better side. They've been the better offensive side as well. But Wigan have had that patch with some injuries and changes in the backs and in the spine. But I think with their possible strongest lineup available, I think it's a case of just this week, the matchups work. KR are the better side. They're the better team this season. I just think for this week, if KR won this one, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest, obviously. I just think it's a case of matchups. The matchups just look good for Wigan in this one. But that left edge versus Eckersley, that is a key one where KR could really exploit. But for a prediction, I'm going to go with Wigan Warriors 18, Hull Kingston Rovers 14. Next up, we have the Castleford Tigers taking on the Leeds Rhinos. Starting with form, Cass have won 1 in their last 5. Leeds have won 3 in their last 5. The form for Leeds actually is win, loss, win, loss, win. So a little bit inconsistent right now. But they've had a mix of tough and not so tough opponents so far in the last 5 weeks. Now, Castleford had some changes to their backs versus KR. They looked quite unsettled. They didn't really have a proper number 7. It was Westerman playing at 7. They had Windley, who hasn't played that much this year, at number 1. Assey was the only regular at 6, really. So the spine, I don't know what it's going to look like for Cass this week. But if it's anything similar to last week, the positive is they get more time together to work on stuff. The negative is it's probably not going to produce as much as they'd like with, say, Atkin in there, or with especially Hoy, whenever he's available, I actually don't know. Or at least with Fletcher Rooney or Sini, who, when he's played at fullback, has looked quite comfortable. Casford's forwards, I don't think they will compete this week. I think it'll be a case of a few strong carries here and there. Some from Amon, some from Stimson, who can get a few offloads, so he might be helpful in that department. Or Singleton, when he comes on. There'll be a few moments where we'll see some good carries from Cass, but over 80 minutes. I am basically expecting a dominant battle through the middle for Leeds. Basically, another typical thing of Leeds as well. In possession, I've mentioned this plenty of times, they shift the ball towards the left or the right, ends up in the hands of Handley or Newman. What do? Well, they cut back towards the middle. That's what they do. And the reason why that could be more advantageous, first of all, that kind of acts as a second phase. It's the same kind of principle as getting an offload, and then it's a second phase in the same tackle. Because once you start spreading the ball to the outside, the middles start to get disjointed. Now, the teams with the more mobile packs and the teams that are just better defensively anyway, they don't allow themselves to get out of shape so much in the middle. Castleford are one of those sides that they do have some mobile forwards, but defensively they're not a great side. So they get the ball to Handley and Newman. They cut back towards the middle. They could start making some easy ground through the middle if those forwards are out of shape. So that's another key area where Leeds could not just dominate through their own forwards, but using their backs to eat up more meters. And if they're quicker, they could be harder to bring down in a slightly different way for the middles of Cass. I think Cass might be able to create breaks inside their own half. I've mentioned this as well over the last couple of weeks. It does look like their intent to spread the ball early in the count, deep in their own half, has been more evident over the past few weeks and months. They are attempting to move the ball earlier, and they've found a bit of success as well. So if they're going to get breaks from anywhere, it's possibly inside their own half, shifting the ball early, stretching that Leeds defence. Inside the red zone, they're not creating that much. Maybe they can come up with something with a kick to the corner. Sim, aerially, over the last couple of weeks, he's been getting up there, and he's been winning some of those high contests. So possibly to Sim in the corner, a few kicks in his direction, could come up with something, possibly, we will see. And then Lewis Senior is quite a tall guy as well, so he could be used. Maybe he could be used to kind of barge over inside the red zone or inside the 10, a few metres out. But Assey is possibly going to be another weapon for Cass as well. Give him the ball just kind of left at the sticks, draws in a few, or players jump the gun. They don't put that inside pressure in, steps off his left foot, and there's a gap to go through. So there's a few areas where Cass could exploit and possibly use what they've been doing to their advantage to get some tries, get some points in this game. But defensively, we know how good Leeds are, so we'll see how that goes. I think Cass have also shown that they can start or end games well. It's normally through the middle of the game, they kind of drop off. They either fight back later on or start really well. This is when they're not putting in those incredible performances that I've talked about before, when Cas just show up as this elite side. They can start well or finish well. Leeds can start or end slow. That's an issue in their game that could make it a little bit closer. I think if Leeds start fast, if they start with energy, I think they'll be completely fine. If they start slow and Cas start well, a little bit like how they did against KR, the first 20 minutes was decent. They could frustrate Leeds later on into the game, and the closer they can keep that contest, the more likely Cas are to get a result. But the thing is, even in games where Leeds, maybe they've been taking a bit of time to stretch the game out. Salford was a prime example a few weeks back, that later on they can get their act together, they can get back into the rhythm that they like and start putting points on the board. And I think even if Cas start well, Leeds are slow, it's later on or through the middle of the game where Leeds should be fine. Their defence has been great this season, and I don't think they'll be troubled too much, and they could find a fair few points. Castlefold's conceded 36 and 40 in the last 2 weeks, so we could be looking at that kind of range for Leeds because they certainly know how to pile on the points. Croft is playing well, Connor's playing well, Miller I think is playing excellent as well in the last couple of months. And yeah, they just seem to be clicking at the moment, Leeds. So they're just really firing right now. So for prediction, I'm going to go with Castleford Tigers 10, Leeds Rhinos 38. Next up, we have another great matchup this week in Hull FC taking on Leigh Leopards. Starting with form, Hull have won 3 in their last 5, Leigh have won 4 in their last 5. I think a really important question for this game is how well will Hull FC start this game? That's going to be huge, I think. Now, you look at their starts in the last few weeks. Salford was fast. That was to be expected. Huddersfield was slow. Wigan was fast. Wakefield was slow. They still got the win there, but that was one of Wakefield's worst performances of the season. So that kind of got a bit fortunate there. And then Saints was also slow. So a few too many slow starts. Whereas Leigh, they seem to start fast pretty much every single week. And they did, especially against a great side like Leeds. They took an 8-point lead. Yes, they lost it and went down 16-8. But Leigh have been starting fast pretty much every single week, it feels. Both have big and mobile packs. That's going to be an interesting battle. We look at Hull FC first. SASA is likely to get more post-contact meters and offloads. Aiden feels quite mobile. I don't know if he's been getting the meters that I was hoping he could have done by this point in the season. I think he was doing better the first half of the season. But Aiden is fairly mobile. SA, strong impact player as well. And then Ashworth as well. But the mobility and the impact, the meters, everything up front has been looking stronger from Leigh in recent weeks. And especially without Liam Knight for Hull FC. I think as the season's gone on, Liam Knight got better. I wasn't that convinced when he first joined. But I think he's been getting better as the season's gone on, in all honesty. And whether it's carries through the middle from him, or sometimes playing in that 13 role, first receiver sometimes, what Asiato was meant to be doing, but he was out. Liam Knight was huge in that area, but I'm not sure exactly how long he's out for. I just know he's not going to be available this week. But with Price and Asiata back in, Asiata should be back in. Price is a question mark because he did look a bit uncomfortable against Salford. I think he sort of groaning a little bit about or tweaked something during the game. So not sure if Price is going to be rested or not. But I think he should be fine, but we'll see. Asiata being back though means that they've got more, first of all, strike in their attack if Price is back. That pace will be huge towards the edges. But with Asiata at 13, they're also cleaner moving the ball. And the thing is, your 13s are important, first of all, deciding when to take carries. And Asiata can take some strong carries through the middle, first off. But second is, if you're moving the ball more cleanly, more accurately, quicker, it means that your attacking shapes that you've been practicing all year long can flow a little bit more smoothly. And the 13 kind of gets things rolling nowadays in today's rugby league. So Asiata will be huge for that reason. I think having him getting some game time as well back in against Salford, feeling that kind of rhythm again, could be important as well. That could be huge. Now, Leigh do have power and speed in their backs, which is really important. I want to talk about that back line, actually. First of all, you got Charnley. Even even though he's coming towards the back end of his career, I don't know how many years he's got left, but he's still really quick. Leigh's been creating a lot of breaks down that left edge, and then Charnley, when he gets the ball, he still looks rapid. And he's breaking through, and he's clean through. Then you've got his centre in Niu, possibly part of the dream team this year. He's one of my favourites for it. His power, his carries in any part of the field against anybody, he can compete with anybody with those carries. Inside the 10, he is extremely dangerous, so he's going to be huge. Then over on the right hand side, Umaila Hanley. Quick brag. I did talk about Hanley recently possibly getting a call-up or chance to play for England in the Ashes. Since I mentioned that, the number of people talking about Hanley for England has risen, so I'm going to take a personal victory on that one. But also Keenan Brand, who I think has gone under the radar a little bit, but I do want to quickly say something about him as it relates to a matchup. And an important matchup could be Martin versus Brand. We know how quick Martin is. He can break lines. He can beat players with his step in a 1v1. He can get around the outside of players, then offload the ball inside. But then against Brand, who I think, first of all, under the high ball has been quite reliable. Carries out the backfield have been quite effective. So, not just taking the ball straight up, being tackled in the 10, sometimes cutting back towards the middle, making a few players miss, sometimes getting offloads as well here and there, but working the ball over the 10, making sure that Leigh can start a little bit further up the field than they otherwise could have done. But I think Brand defensively as well could be huge in this. Yes, he's got Hanley, who I think has been a great defensive player this year, but sometimes when Brand is isolated, he can get a hold of players, drag them into touch himself, or hold on to them for long enough to get that support from that right edge defensively. So that battle for Martin versus Brand I think is going to be a pretty interesting one, given that Hull's left edge attack is probably their strongest, especially in more areas of the field. Inside their own half, inside the midfield, and in the red zone, it's their strongest. They're a little bit stronger down the right inside the red zone than the right is further back in the field. But that left edge attack is best for Hull FC. Compare that to a right edge defence for Leigh. That's an interesting battle. And Brand versus Martin could be interesting. Only word of advice for Brand is just don't be celebrating too early. That's all I have to say. And that's if you score a try anyway. Another interesting one that could open this game up are the options at hooker. You've got Borough for Hull FC, who I think is fine, but probably doesn't make as many breaks as you'd hope for a hooker. You don't always need the hookers to make breaks, and that's not normally their style. It doesn't often look like Borough is taking those carries from the ruck. He'll make a couple of metres, but we don't see many breaks. Whereas, first of all, you can have Ipape starting. Okay, he's one option. He can not only just use his pace to eat up the metres behind the ruck from a quick play of the ball, but he can make extra metres on top of it with his power from his own carries. Then you bring on McNamara, who, if you need to put him in a 6 role, can play in that 6 role. But if he's at 9, that frees up Ipape. You know, if he's gone off for a break, that's fine. But Ipape could go to a 13 role, which means that then frees up somebody else, like Lamb or O'Brien or Hodgson, with a bit more time to be out the back. Lamb doesn't have to be the first receiver. O'Brien doesn't have to be the first receiver. It's Ipape instead. He can make a decision on whether to take a carry, which is often effective. Or then you've got pace with Lamb out the back instead of first receiver. Then you've got Davis. Davis can play 9. He can play 13 as well if need be. But Davis can play 9. That frees up McNamara to play as a 6 alongside O'Brien down the right. Ipape can play as a 7 alongside Lamb down the left. So the options that they have at hooker kind of open up the rest of the backs. So that's another interesting thing to look out for this week. Final few things. First of all, is Caesar playing? I don't know whether he is or isn't. If he is, definitely makes their kicking game more effective and more likely to pin Leigh back. But Leigh still have the kind of players in the forwards and backs to work the ball out their own end and not get pinned back. If Caesar isn't playing, they'll be less effective when spreading the ball down that left edge. And of course, kicking game will suffer slightly. But I think they'll be okay. I don't think they'll be too much different with or without him. The only sort of point of entry I feel for FC, first of all, if they're just playing quick anyway and they execute well, that's like a given that they could compete. But if they're not able to find a way in, the only way that I feel is the way in for them is possibly through Hodgson, who has been so reliable over the last few months at fullback without Armstrong there. I just think recently there's a few errors creeping into Hodgson's game. Only a few, not too many. So it could just be a case of, a high ball, Hodgson can't quite take it, it's a knock on, they turn the ball over inside the red zone or inside Leigh's territory. Only a couple times. I still think Hodgson is reliable, he'll be fine in this game, but it's just a maybe. If you're not really getting anything, aim for Hodgson, just because he's been making a couple of mistakes recently, just a few. But that feels like the only real point of entry if Hull FC aren't playing up to potential, which they haven't done that consistently this season. Whereas Leigh, they are firing right now and they are extremely consistent. And even against Leeds, they were still pretty solid. Not just this time, but even the previous time as well when they lost 48-30. They were still interesting and pacey in possession. So for a prediction, I'm going to go with Hull FC 18, Leigh Leopards 26. Next up, we have St Helens taking on Huddersfield Giants. Starting with form, Saints have won 4 in their last 5. Huddersfield have won 3 in their last 5. Now, I think both packs have had a great year. I still think Huddersfield's pack is going under the radar. There's not enough talk about, I think, Golding when he comes on. There's not enough talk about English or Wilson when they've been starting or coming on from the bench. Burgess, I would like to have seen a bit more from this year, personally. But Greenwood as well. I think Greenwood's gone under the radar. But Saints, I think they've got a little bit more size, a little bit more presence, and are a little bit more effective with their carries, whether it be Leeds taking multiple carries in a set, or Knowles, or especially Wormsley, who is just an absolute menace up front. Huddersfield do look more stable in recent weeks with Frawley at 7. Luke Robinson talked about that in the interview on Sky after the game against Catalans at the weekend. There is a lot more stability with Frawley in there, and I think he's settled in quite nicely, which is good for him. It wasn't really working out that much. There wasn't too much going on when he was at Leeds, but he is now there for a reason. They need him there, and I think he looks comfortable and settled. So that's a good partnership for those two. Rush will be at 6 with Lolohea being out for the rest of the season, according to Ken Davey. Rush will likely be at 6, and hopefully, with the extra week, more reps in training, he can offer a little bit more. A lot of it was either just handing the ball off or a switch back to the centre or back rower. That was it. But with more time, more confidence, more experience, hopefully he can offer just a little bit more individually. But even without him, you then look at Flanagan, who is capable of opening defences by himself. He's got the pace to do it, he's got the step, he's got the skill. He can read defences pretty well. So even if Rush is not quite there yet, which there's no need for him to be, there's no rush, but you know what I mean. There's no rush for him to get up to speed with things. Anyway, Flanagan can make up for that with his pace, and he's just been incredible this season. I think if Huddersfield can keep him locked down for a while, they get Lolohea back in next year. Whether they go with Frawley or Clune at 7, I don't know. Wolford not going through injuries hopefully next season. Huddersfield do have decent makeup for next season, so we will see. But Saints' defence has been incredible. So first of all, they've been really solid. You pair that with a Giants attack that can be good, but is a little bit inconsistent, and is missing their key guy, Lolohea, or one of their key guys, Lolohea, at 6. It looks pretty favourable for Saints defensively. You take that defence in their last 5, conceding just less than 8 points per game. I think it's 7.8 points per game they've conceded in the last 5. That's ridiculous. And then it was 0 against Salford the week before that. So defensively, excellent. I think Mbai's kicking has also looked really good. He's their Matt Frawley. He's keeping them stable in the number 7 role. So I think Mbai's kicking will be huge. Plus, you look at the size of the forwards. The forwards can get Saints up the field a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. You then get the decent kicking from Mbai. There's a few too many times it's either out on the fall or goes over the dead ball line. So there's a few too many errors in there. If you can clean those up, it doesn't gift opportunities for Huddersfield to kind of change the tide through the middle. So as long as Mbai's good there, Saints should be fine at being able to pin the Giants back. So I think they'll be okay in that area and win the field position battle. But if there's too many mistakes from Mbai's kicking over the dead ball line for a 7-tackle set or out in the full, then that brings the Giants back into the game. So that's going to be interesting. So I'm kind of looking at Mbai just to keep things clean. So he's going to be huge. But at this point, St. Helens look really settled in attack. They might have Wellesby back. I heard he was possibly back for this week. I'm not entirely sure. But even if they don't, they look quite settled with whoever's in what position, whether it be Sailor back on the wing, Sailor back in the halves. They kind of look like they could shift things around a little bit, but they look comfortable. They look confident. Mbai at 7, Sailor at 6, or whether it be at 1. I think down that right edge, Robertson had a good start to the season. He looks more comfortable recently, and the opportunities they're creating down the right edge with Felt as well, whether it be individual moments from Felt, just going up for an aerial battle in the corner, he's winning those, or them just creating opportunities down the right edge inside the midfield anyway. Saints are looking more comfortable in possession, and we saw a couple times inside the red zone against Wakefield, who are a strong and mobile side, that they could still find gaps, create opportunities, and punch holes inside the red zone. So, and they did that against Cass as well. So we're seeing a much improved attack from St. Helens, which is going to be huge again this week. I think this is the kind of game where you would expect Saints to win, but it's important, based on what their season's been like, to actually go out and get it done, and to actually show that their attack is still consistent. I think it's quite important for Saints this week. Now, I don't have any major issues with the Giants' defence. It's not been great this year, as we know, but I mean more recently when they've had more cohesion in the lineup that they want. They've had more players back from injury. So overall, I've not had any major issues with their defence, but I do think they have the capabilities of conceding very, very quick points in concession. Wakefield was a prime example of that, and I think Saints actually have the ability to pile on the points in quick succession or march up the field. So that's going to be an issue. If Huddersfield can at least limit that, it's a good start. But Saints do have the ability to still march up the field, even after just scoring, whether it be a penalty or a try. Saints can march back up the field. And if Huddersfield allow that to happen, Saints could really get a roll on this week. So for a prediction, I'm going to go with St. Helens 30, Huddersfield Giants 6. Finally, for this round, we have Salford Red Devils taking on Wakefield Trinity. Starting with form, Salford have 1 win in their last 5. Wakefield have 3 wins in their last 5. Unfortunately, this week, it's not a case of will Salford have some of their regulars back in there, like the likes of Hankinson, Brierley, Ormonroyd. Will they have a stronger side to be able to put out? They don't even have the option of maybe being able to put that out. It is just going to be a lot of reserve/academy players, whatever word you want to use, and loanees. So, yeah, we will see. The positive this week, because I always want to try and look at least some positive, is, first of all, the carries were actually a lot better against FC than I expected. I really thought they'd get stuck inside their own red zone. I really thought they would. But there were a lot of good carries. And they actually moved the ball up the field a little bit. In the sets that they did actually have, they did all right moving the ball up the field. And there was, I think it was Littlewood. I think he was in the back row on the left-hand side. I think it's Littlewood. His carries look pretty good. Making some post-contact meters, landing on his front, quick play of the balls. So, positive there. I think the other positive as well, at least still to give them some credit and give them positives, is even though they had a bunch of players they'd never played with before, didn't meet until the day of the game, like Riley Lund, for example, and a few others, is that now they've got an extra week to at least work on some of the basics, get a bit more familiar with each other, work on the basic combinations, be a little bit more resilient in defence, maybe come up with some more stuff offensively. There's a positive. They've got an extra week together. So there's something that could make the game slightly more bearable to watch than it was last week, or the scoreline a little bit more favourable. So there's something, because I don't want to just completely say all negatives. There's some positives for you. Now, Wakefield, they'll want to get back to winning ways, of course, and they will want to maintain that points difference, especially against Hull FC. Hull FC were able to claw back 74 points plus on Wakefield, but Wakefield have the chance to basically answer back with that, if not more. And there's 2 opportunities to do that this season as well. They've got Salford again, I think, possibly the last round of the season, I think. Now, Wakey could decide to rest a couple players. I don't know what their depth is like overall, so there might not be that many to rest. Maybe just 1 or 2. Anyone that's got a nagging injury that could sit out and then they swap things around. Maybe a case where they could, a hypothetical where Truman gets a rest at 6, so Jarrett goes to 6, and then Rourke at 1. Something like that. They could just move some pieces around. If anyone's got something that's lingering, they get an extra week off. But I don't think there'd be that many changes to that many players rested. I'm looking at players like Jowett, basically, if he is going to be playing, or whether he's rested, I don't know, to basically pile on points. Wormsley's an option that could do it as well. I do think the reason why Wakefield probably wouldn't change much as well, and a positive that could be good for them going forwards, is it's another week under their belts to build confidence in combinations. They might want to keep the same team that they had last week, or go with a team that they've wanted to have all season, or the best that they can put out. And then it's another week that could be, without disrespect behind this, it could be like a training, training session to work on the combinations and kind of put them in a real game scenario and feel a little bit more confident and comfortable with those. I think Wakefield have the potential of putting up more points than Hull FC. I feel like Wakefield are a little bit more ruthless with that, so if they do get on a roll like FC did, I don't know if they drop off as much as FC did. They might want to beat Saints' score of 82-0 in round 1. I just think maybe the potential of some players rested for Wakefield, the potential of Salford maybe having some better defensive structure with an extra week together, maybe could just bring the scoreline down very, very slightly. But for a prediction, I'm going to go with Salford Red Devils 6, Wakefield Trinity 68. So there you have my Super League Round 22 predictions. As always, if you guys have your own predictions, please do let me know in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like. It does help to get the video out there to more people. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Kinetic Rugby League content. And if you'd like to become a member and support the work that I do for this channel, you can do by clicking the join button below this video and joining for as little as £1 per month. But that's going to be it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.